politics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Trey Orndorff, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University, and I'm joined by Ken Katkin, a professor at law at Chase Law School. Welcome back to the show, Ken.
Thanks, Trey. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it is always fun when we get our month time to come out and bother people. I mean, inform people about stuff. It's kind of I think we're really getting the great time slot because last week, as listeners will know, we kind of took a little bit of a hiatus. A lot of us who are doing educational stuff, like Ken and myself, we were getting prepped for and getting into classes, and with the unusual nature of this particular fall semester, we had opted to kind of take that week off. So Ken, you and I, we get to actually relaunch the show for fall 2020 here after our week hiatus. And so, listeners, I hope you have a good time with me and Ken. So I think the big thing that we need to start with here is actually we've got a big news item from the Politics Guys. I don't know, I think you might know about this, Ken, but I'm not sure. But did you know that coming this Wednesday, that's August the 26th, we're going to be running a series of midweek shows on the 2020 election. Now, the first show, again, is coming this Wednesday, and it's going to be focused on election security and voter fraud. And there's going to be future episodes focusing on other key policy differences between Trump and Biden, including COVID-19 response, healthcare, economic policy, regulation, race and gender, immigration, and a whole lot more. Now, the series is going to be hosted by Mike, but what's unique about this is instead of having one of the normal other co-hosts, Mike is going to be joined by 6 Northern Kentucky University students who are actually taking a special elections and podcast class with Mike this fall semester. And what's also kind of cool about it is that the students range from being completely committed Trump voters, and as I understand it, they range in age as well, but from completely committed Trump voters to some really fiery progressives. So there's going to be a whole lot of ideological diversity, and that's something that is very important to all of us here on the Politics Guys. Now, the other cool part about this Wednesday show is this Wednesday series is going to be available to everyone, not just Patreon supporters. Now, we're going to continue to have our Patreon-only's bonus show on Wednesdays, that full-length supporter episode. As a matter of fact, Ken and I will be recording one shortly, and we hope you'll join with us on Wednesday. But additionally, again, starting Wednesday, August 26th, Mike and 6 students from Northern Kentucky University are going to be doing these special, available to everyone, midweek shows on the 2020 elections. And I know that I and everybody else hope that you'll check it out and let the Politics Guys know what you think. Well, now, did you know about that, Ken?
No, that's the first time hearing about any of that, although I do think Michael told me he was teaching a course about the election and podcasting, so I should have figured that this might be in the works.
It was all coming together. Yeah, this is in fact Michael's class, right? I mean, he's got the sweetest class deal for the semester. He's basically doing the podcast. So good job on that, Mike. And for the students, I'm excited to hear what they have to say. Now, for our show, though, Ken, this week, of course, the thing that dominated all the political oxygen was the DNC convention. And one of the things that was fascinating to me was it was unprecedented in that it was done solely through media stream. So we didn't have the big room. We didn't have all the delegates in the same way. As a result, as I was watching, there was obviously a lot more control. For those of us who kind of keep up with other avenues, it reminded me a lot of Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference this past summer, where they got to kind of control the whole message in a way they didn't always do when you had all the journalists in the room at the same time. And it really got me to thinking, Ken, do you think this is a technological turning point? And what I've been thinking about is, if you think about it, this has been a pattern that we've observed historically, right? We see this with FDR and fireside chat with radio, the use of radio. He uses this new medium, captures attention. And then we have another major turning point in media politics when you have the debates between Nixon and JFK, as we get viewers who are watching versus listening, responding differently. And so for me, as somebody who's long trumpeted that political communication needs to better account for technological advances, did you have that kind of feeling this week with me as you looked in this? Is the DNC convention, is this kind of crossing the Rubicon? Is this the convention in the age of streaming? And do you think it's going to happen again in 2024, even if it's modified, but more in this vein as opposed to the old school, everybody in a room?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's true about so many aspects of American life. You and I have been doing more online teaching than we used to do. And I don't think that's ever going to go all the way back to the way it used to be. A lot of people have been telecommuting more than they used to. And I don't think that's going to go all the way back to the way it used to be. And I think this is another example of that. I think there's aspects of the way this DNC convention was television friendly that I think some aspects of it were a lot easier to do this way than to do in a big room with 20,000 people. And I'm sure that they will go back to having big rooms with 20,000 people. But I think when you're watching it at home, you're going to see a mixture of footage from that big room with 20,000 people and a lot more of the kind of more intimate footage that we were seeing this week.
Do you think that offers, I mean, one of the things that I find unique is how do different kinds of presentations of information lead to different kinds of responses? In other words, what are the effects of different information dissemination types? And so for me, as I was watching the DNC's platform, I mean, you got to see, like, for example, we get the stutter speech, which I think is this really powerful moment. You get Billy Elijah, kind of this really powerful moment for Biden, but in a way you never would have done on a stage. One of the things that we kind of see as you move from into the television age is the ability of candidates to better kind of package themselves, and it seems like this might be maybe the height of that, the ability to just make sure exactly every element of what you want to come forward. So when you say the 20,000 people in a room, do you kind of see this maybe as like the Olympics in the future, where you have, a glimpse of kind of everybody's yelling for the 50 yard dash, but then we have all of this kind of pre-packaged material about the athletes surrounding it?
Yeah, that's kind of the way I was thinking about it. I mean, there were certain kinds of things that were lost. That some of the types of some aspects of some of the speeches, I think, would have been more effective if there would have been 20,000 people applauding at the right moments. And I think they're going to want to get that back. But I think what they gained in compensation for that was that it made it so much more possible to make it feel more close, more intimate, more personal. And I think that's something we had this past week that I think, as we've said, is going to have some staying power.
Now, that's more of the packaging, and I am a guy. I mean, it's just my training, it's my literature. I'm always interested in the packaging and in the media delivery. Yeah. But on the content side, I am curious, especially about your position on this. Because whether you're looking at left-wing outlets or right-wing outlets, they both seem to me to really be attacking the convention. And it made me chuckle, to be honest, because it seemed like on the left, we have a lot of Democrats worried that Biden and Harris are really just more of the same centrist Democratic policies that have always happened. The same kind of complaint, I think, that was happening in 2016 with Clinton. And they look at things and they complain, like, so for example, AOC only got 60 seconds of airtime. But of course, current Republicans got a lot of airtime, something we've been kind of debating on the Reddit Bipartisan Politics and on our Facebook page. So what about for you, Ken? Did you see this as being a convention that was attempting to push things to the left or to the right?
No, I saw this as a convention that was seeking to submerge those kind of questions. It was all about not pushing things to the left and not pushing things to the right, but trying to de-emphasize policy, really, and to unify the party. And I think the you did hear from a lot of Republicans, and also I think Biden's speech was really an outreach to Republicans, and sort of saying, he'll be a president for everybody, and he's not going to make big changes that big segments of the population won't like. I think that there's a huge focus on unifying the party and on getting rid of Trump and on winning, and that's really created a lot of consensus within the party that the political battles between the left wing of the Democratic Party and the centrist wing of the Democratic Party are going to be fought later during the years of the Biden administration, not during the campaign.
Now, this is one of the things that I've heard from my more left-leaning outlets and left-leaning friends, which is basically, look, every time, what you just said there, we're not going to debate that now. We're going to have it happen during the administration. We're not going to debate that now. We're going to have it happen in the administration. And I think that's why there's been some critique. I think some relatively loud critique, which I found a little surprising given that you want to beat Trump, suggesting, look, it's time to give up on centrist policies. You've got to give us our airtime now. We've got to hash these things out now. You can't keep pushing us after elections, because after elections, it never seems to happen. And the reason I guess I'm pushing you on this is that you're probably a little bit further to left than the average Democratic voter. So how do you feel about? I mean, you seem pretty comfortable with saying, look, we've got to elect a Biden and move forward, and then have this conversation later. Do you have any sympathy for those who say, look, no, it's our time finally, it's now?
No, I don't. And I think it's very significant that Bernie Sanders is looking at this the way I was just talking. AOC is looking at this the way I was just talking. They're very willing to not push their agendas right now and not create divisiveness within the party, because they see that really the opponent that they want to have going forward is Biden. The opponent that they don't want to have is Trump. Right. So if you think like they're going to have a lot of disagreements with Biden, that's fine. Biden's the one they want to have their disagreements with. Trump's not the one they want to have their disagreements with. So I think the serious progressives who were part of this political season, and that would essentially be Sanders, Warren, and maybe people like AOC, although she wasn't running for president.
Right.
They're all on board. They're all on board with this strategy. Right. They're all willing to sublimate any critique of centrist Democratic politics for now to unify the party. And I think that's the only sensible thing to do. I don't have really any sympathy for people who want to create division within the Democratic Party right now.
Okay. I hear that, and it's interesting to me sometimes because your policies when we have a conversation are a little bit further left, but I think oftentimes you feel more willing to moderate them in election years than I see, at least in my experience, some other Democratic voters seem to be willing to do. And so you're always an interesting case example for me, Ken.
Yeah, well, I don't think that Biden is coming in with a left agenda. I think Biden is coming in with what was essentially the Clinton agenda, and maybe the Obama agenda, although I think maybe even closer to the Clinton agenda. But that's okay, because he's going to listen to all the Democrats, right? He's going to, if the center of gravity within the Democrats moves further to the left, I think he will move further to the left. So that's the kind of politics that there can be time for later.
So, we're talking about divisiveness and parties. And so I think the other thing, maybe ironically in a way, that comes up during the DNC debate, the DNC convention, is that the number of Republicans at the convention. Now, from my point of view, I'm just going to put that out there. I was happy. I was happy to see a lot of prominent Republicans come out in favor of Biden. I thought it was a good move. I thought it was a strategic move on the Democrats' part to put those individuals front and center. As the hosts have been talking about online, again, we've been kind of hashing this out on Bipartisan Politics and on the Facebook page, is, as far back as you kind of really take a look at, there's not really another phenomenal example where you have so many prominent non-democratic figures coming out in favor of the opposite party. I mean, maybe you have Lieberman. It's something that was brought up online from Jay a couple days ago. But, that's one individual. We got a lot of people here. For me personally, it made me feel a little bit less alone. But I kind of wonder what this means for the Republican Party. And I wonder, from your point of view, how did you feel did you feel like Republicans in part were kind of co-opting, or were you happy to see us anyway, in the same way you were saying, like, look, I'll have the debates with you later once Biden wins?
Yeah, I was happy. I think it was good, but I did hear a lot more of that kind of critique. I certainly heard from fellow Democrats who felt that there was something compromising, I guess, about having so many Republicans
like
supporting Biden.
His in the middle of the road speech. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, that would mean that Biden would have to be moving to the right, and so maybe that wasn't necessary or good. I heard that critique, but I don't agree with it, because the election is going to be won in the same states that it was won in 4 years ago. It's going to be Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, maybe Ohio, maybe Florida, and to win those states, it is going to be helpful to get some Republican votes. And if you think about maybe 10 or 15% of Republicans really don't like Trump, if you can peel off even half of those voters, then those close states aren't going to be close anymore. So I think it's electorally necessary. And I think it's actually consistent with Biden's message that part of the kind of personal decency that he's running on is that he's going to be a president for all Americans, not only for Americans who voted for him. And I think he's serious about that. So I think it's actually a good look to show that, to demonstrate that by putting a lot of Republicans up there.
Now, this also brings up a question, a unique one and that is, it's one thing. I mean, it doesn't appear that Kasich or Powell are on the verge of jumping ship and becoming Democrats at this moment. But it seems likely, though, if the Republican Party remains that way, that there could be an exodus of Republicans into the Democratic Party. And as if you're saying, it doesn't have to be a bunch, even if you can capture a third of disaffected Republican voters and they come over and decide to become Democrats in a longer term way because they see Trump's push in policy as being permanent. So even if Trump, the individual, doesn't end up being a permanent fixture in the Republican Party, that his fingerprints remain on the party. How do you feel as a Democrat about that? Because I can see that shifting a little bit the center of gravity. It's one thing for Biden to come out with this kind of message of unity, but do you see any kind of realignment 2 years down the line as we're looking at midterm elections, or 4 years down the line as Republican voters start to potentially peel off and or that aggravates further those more progressive Democrats who have long been in the Democratic Party and already thinking it's a little bit too conservative?
I don't have a prediction about what's going to happen. I don't have my crystal ball polished today, but I will say that I would welcome that. I think if you're going to be a majority party with a sustainable coalition, so you're going to keep that majority, then it's going to be a relatively big tent. And that is going to mean that it's probably going to have to be a coalition of progressives and centrists. And I think that's fine. I'd rather have, even though you might say the center of gravity there is going to be a little further to the right, that's going to be true on some issues and maybe not on other issues. Maybe on some issues, the center of gravity will be further to the left. And I think to have a workable, sustainable majority, as a progressive myself, really, I would like to have the situation of having these arguments with fellow Democrats, even if they're centrists, rather than having to have these arguments with Republicans. So I do think, victory is the most important thing. If a realignment can be created, that's the most important thing. And if the cost of that is that there's going to be more people in my own party who I disagree with on some issues, that's fine, because they'll listen and I'll listen to them.
Well, that's kind of what I figured you'd say, to be real honest. But I was wondering if I could push you into a corner.
Yeah. In some ways, even what Franklin Roosevelt did, right? I mean, Franklin Roosevelt passed an awful lot of progressive legislation, but the coalition that he built was by the standards of the day, centrists and progressives. And then he had a huge coalition. Now, I was also going to say, I almost forgot about the realignment. Yeah, Nixon did that, right? So Nixon peeled off a percentage of Southern Democrats.
The Southern strategy.
Got a permanent. Yeah, he got a permanent realignment out of that, or at least one that maybe lasted until maybe just about now, if it's finally starting to realign the other way now. But it does happen. There are times where there can be significant numbers of defections from one party to another by certain demographics, and I do think Nixon pulled that off, and then Reagan really cemented that as well. So we have seen that kind of thing.
No, I don't disagree. I think one of the things that is hard in the contemporary era is that as you move forward, the party realignments, I think a lot of times, and this is probably due in part to the hopeful nature of people who don't want to affiliate with a party and or third party members who are always hoping that, this year is going to be the year that, pick which of the major parties starts to defect. There's going to be a realignment, and therefore, the libertarians are going to be the next, dominant party. But really, party realignments in the contemporary era and the modern era, they haven't been in the sense of changing the party apparatus, but rather changing the coalitions that define those party apparatuses, or changing the voters who align with one of those parties as a result of ideological shifts. So I agree with you on that. And that's kind of why I brought that question up. I will say, though, of course, there was a thought that during Barack Obama, there had been a number of kind of scholarly works and popular works talking about, the Southern Strategy Part 2. Can Barack Obama peel enough African-American voters from southern states and or some conservatives to move that over? And there seemed to be evidence that it might happen, and then it just kind of fizzled. And you're right. Crystal balls are notoriously difficult to peer into. Yeah. But I do think
I feel as though
this is an age that could happen.
Well,
yeah. Sorry. No, please.
Could happen. Yeah, with the African Americans in the South, I think that's going to require change in a little bit more demographic change and a little bit more change in percentage who vote. But it does seem like some states like North Carolina could be up for grabs now. So maybe that I think Obama did carry North Carolina, and then it didn't. It didn't really stay in the Democratic column very much, but it's heading back into the Democratic column now, I think. So, and certainly with Virginia, it completely flipped into the Democratic column by now. So we have seen a few states where there've been those kind of shifts, but I do think it's hard to know whether to attribute that to changes from a particular demographic and how they vote, or whether it's just changes in the demographic that lives in the state. Like maybe in Virginia, it's because more and more of the population is in suburban D.C. rather than in the more traditional parts of Virginia. So it's hard for me to get to the bottom of what causes all that. But we certainly see some states that were solid red moving into being very close and competitive right now.
No, and that's true. The other possibility is we're still seeing, and I think this is something that's very difficult when you're looking. On the show, we always focus on the current events, that week's events, and it can be really easy to always see the event that's occurring in front of you as being the defining event, as opposed to being part of a trajectory of motion, right? And so I like what you're kind of suggesting here, even if somebody doesn't agree with the outcome, the idea that you have to look at social events as kind of having a lagged effect, right? So things that start to happen and build, they don't generally produce their results immediately. Instead, it takes time for those things to kind of disseminate into culture. So you have these delayed variables that affect things, and definitely voting would fall into that category. Now, another item from the DNC. And this is one, another first. We're talking about, well, does this change the way that the DNC is going to present conventions in the future? But we also had another first this year, and that was the president, Donald Trump, is live tweeting his responses to the Democratic convention as they're going on. Now, he kind of remains silent until Michelle Obama starts talking. But by the time we get to Thursday, the tweets from Trump are coming blazingly fast. And this kind of it ties into our first question, right? The format of this allows for tweets to kind of be, the two-screen medium. So what do you think about this? I mean, this is a new protocol era we're in. The President of the United States, he's obviously watching it through some of his affiliates and live responding to it. Now, I think we're kind of used to that, when you're watching Hamilton, but this is a first when it comes to the president or a convention. So what did you take of this other new precedent?
I think that's idiosyncratic with Trump. If he gets reelected, he'll probably keep doing that. But if anyone else is president, if Biden gets elected now, or if another Republican comes in afterwards, I don't think you're going to see much more of that. I think the type of convention we saw might represent a paradigm shift. I think the really inappropriate and low class behavior that Trump is exhibiting, I don't think a lot of the types who are going to be nominees to run for president of the major parties going forward are going to really be wanting to engage in that kind of behavior.
Well, the reason I was thinking about it was we have now seen a lot of congresspersons even nearly live streaming other events, including State of the Union addresses. And so, so you're kind of just dismissing it and saying, I think that's the end of the day. But don't you kind of see that behavior being normalized at the congressional level, and that might then therefore trickle up to the president? Or do you think that's just, well, again, like you said, idiosyncratic behavior of the president, and people who take the presidency are going to put that down below them? They're not going to do that kind of thing anymore.
Well, I mean, of course, you pointed out rightly that there's some Trump-like people in Congress. So you've got Jim Jordan and Louis Gohmert and people like that. I like to think that they're not going to be nominees for president. Maybe they are, but I think I'm still kind of thinking that Trump. Well, I mean, I can't, maybe he's realigned to the Republican Party and all the nominees are going to be like Trump from now on. But I just still find it hard to believe that could be a sustainable party. And I think the party is going to have to just conduct itself with a little more class and a little more dignity to really have a role as one of our major political parties. And it doesn't seem like that because Trump's he got elected, he's president, and he's acting the way he acts. But I just have a hard time believing that that's really our future. But maybe I'm just being a Pollyanna here. Maybe I'm whistling past the graveyard.
Well, I mean, I guess there could be a middle ground too, in the sense that you could see some additional class, but you could still see less all cap screaming and or personal attacks while you're still commenting on the things in real time. But you make an interesting point. Maybe it gets so tied to the classlessness of Trump that the opposite thing happens, and people kind of step back from it and say, "Well, I don't want to seem like I don't want even a hint that I'm in that category, and therefore I'm just going to abstain from that kind of behavior altogether." That could be the case. I just have one last thing I want to talk about on the convention, and then we'll move forward. And maybe this is just a pet peeve to me, and so maybe, Ken, you're just going to say, Trey, this is just, you're being crazy. But it's Bill Clinton, okay? I'm just going to come out with it. Why Bill Clinton? Why can't he just go away? I mean, so he comes out this week and he's talking in the same exact week that he has to have another scandal when he gets all posy with an Epstein victim. The Daily Beast this week broke the story, and so did the Daily Mail, about Bill Clinton. And I have to admit, as excited as I was to see a lot of the convention, as excited as I was to see Republicans willing to come out against Trump, I kind of felt that hasn't the Democratic Party moved beyond the Clinton era? And doesn't he really embody some of the things that we're attacking with Trump? And so for me, I just saw it as being a horrible optic. I was just really disappointed with the Clinton speaking spot. And I was curious how you felt about that from a different point of the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand what a compromised figure Bill Clinton is. And I agree with you probably that the convention would have been just fine if he didn't speak there.
Because what does he add? Like, who does he reach out to? That's what I was thinking. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right.
I didn't mean to
I agree with you on that, but yet I think there's a couple. I don't want to just say it was a huge mistake to have him speak, because think about a few things here. First, in 2012, that's only 8 years ago, when Obama was nominated to run for re-election, and they had the Democratic convention. Bill Clinton gave probably the best speech at that Democratic convention. So he's capable of giving a very good convention speech. This one was a little bit anodyne, and they only gave him 5 minutes, maybe because they were so worried about the optics of having Bill Clinton speak.
Well, and then it came to pass, of course. Yeah.
Yes. But he is actually he has been in his life a really good public speaker at events like this. And it was possible that he could have really delivered a speech that could have been very effective. Now, in the event, I don't think that happened, but I don't blame them for thinking that could happen. Also, I think it was important in a certain sense, symbolically, to have all of the former Democratic presidents contribute in some way. Even Jimmy Carter did. Because it contrasts with what's going to happen next week, right? Now, there's only one living former Republican president, but he's not going to be there, and he's not going to endorse Trump. And I think we pretty well know that his father wouldn't have been there and wouldn't have endorsed Trump if he'd lived,
yeah.
Right? And so, so I think the idea of saying all the Democrats that have been president, are fully in support of Biden, and compare that to, on the other side, all the Republicans that survived, and even a few that recently died, they would have all voted for Biden also, not for Trump. So I think creating that optic is helpful in a certain way. But I do agree with the negatives, that you identified. I mean, those are real.
Well, and I'll finish on this because we've spent a bunch of time on the convention, and that's good and that's happy. But of course, we recognize that conventions don't change voters for the most part, right? This is events that are really more about, I think, signaling and helping us understand what these kind of larger frames are going to be, more so than the specifics. But I mean, you bring up a good frame there, right? The presidents versus no president. And I'll be honest, I hadn't thought about that was not something that had occurred to me. I don't know if it gives me a pass on Clinton, but I had not thought about it in that frame. Well, Ken, I think we might need to move on to our that was a big first story, but we need to move on to a second story, and that is that this week the Select Intelligence Committee's bipartisan report on the Russian interference in the 2016 election came out, specifically Volume 5. Yes, it's such a big deal that we have 5 volumes. Now, I don't know how many listeners get as wonky as I do about some of this stuff. So I had downloaded the volume. I've downloaded all of them. I got Volume 5 this week, and it clocks in. Do you know how big it is? I'm just wondering.
Almost 1,000 pages.
Yeah, you were 966. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's anybody as wonky as me, it's probably you. Yeah, it comes in at 966 pages, and a lot of times I've looked at congressional documents. For those of us who are around, I think a lot of us read portions of, or large portions of, the report on 9/11, and a lot of these things they're important, but they're not always easy reads, right? Nobody dives down and think, I will actually say that this is a pretty readable document. And, I read it before a lot. I mean, I haven't gotten through, obviously, I have not read all 966 pages. I don't think, Ken, did you read all 966 pages?
No, I'm addled when it comes to reading downloads on computers. I'm going to buy a copy of this, and then I'll actually read the whole thing. But right now, it's only available. Do what I did.
Put it on the iPad, and then you can read it in dark mode.
I'm too old for that. I just got to get a book.
Okay. Well, wait. You can't be that old, Ken.
Yeah, I'm just I'm set in my ways though.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to make you out yourself right here on the show.
I'm going to buy a copy when it's printed. The publishers are printing it, and then I'll be able to read it all. But I did download it also, and I've jumped around in it to get to the summaries and things. But I just couldn't. I just don't have it in me to read all that.
I hear you. Yeah. Well, here's what's. I'm going to talk about some of the points, and I thought we might hit some of the major points. But the optic thing, that's where I always end up heading first. This report is being kind of widely praised by both Republicans and Democrats, right? But for some very, very different reasons. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, in a press release, praised the report on the investigation that, as a matter of fact, that he had set in motion way back in 2016. And he said, quote, "I commend my colleagues on both sides for keeping their work out of the partisan spotlight and their focus on the facts," end quote. In the same press release, McConnell's going to use a lot of the same language that acting committee chairman Marco Rubio did, saying things that this report reaffirms that special counsel Mueller's finding that President Trump did not collude with Russia. Now, from the guy who's been reading the report, that strikes me as a little bit unusual. Yeah,
right. Yeah, that's quite a lot of spin, because the report makes clear that Donald Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, did in fact collude with Russian intelligence.
Yes, you don't even have to read into the report. You can just read like the takeaway paragraph.
Yeah. So it doesn't. I guess it doesn't say for sure that Donald Trump was aware that Paul Manafort was colluding with Russian military intelligence, but it does say that it's been proved that Konstantin Kilimnik, who was Manafort's deputy, who helped him with all this stuff, was actively working for Russian military intelligence the whole time.
Well, I think a lot of what this comes about to, and this is something else that we've been debating on the Bipartisan Politics Reddit and on our Facebook page, and that is I think that my friends on the right, what they see here is they're like, yes, I agree with all this, because this all shows that the collusion has nothing to do with Trump. Now, I don't take that view, and Ken and I, we've already talked about that. But I'm curious about your response to it, because you're going to come from a different place than me. So, what do you say to the person who says, "Look, I get it. Yeah, Manafort, he was a scudsy dude, but he got things done. Trump didn't know what was going on. The most important people didn't know what was going on. That's not collusion. Nowhere in here does it say, Trump colluded, and therefore." This just confirms this has all been kind of a hoax out to get Donald Trump. What's your response to that? I'm curious.
Well, I do think that Trump himself is personally implicated in this report by the phone records of the phone calls that Trump had with Roger Stone about the WikiLeaks, right? So that
in part three, Stone, I believe, yeah.
In part three, which Stone had lied about to investigators, and that's one of the things that he was convicted of lying about to investigators. But the phone records pretty much show that Stone and Trump were discussing ahead of time each time WikiLeaks was about to release some of the hacked Democratic emails. So I think that implicates Trump directly in the collusion. I also think that you really can't. You have to really suspend disbelief to think that Trump's own campaign manager, Manafort, has a top deputy who's a Russian military intelligence officer, and Trump is sending Don Jr. and Jared and these guys
to the Trump meetings, Tower meeting, which is part of the report.
Which is part of the report, yeah. To meet with Russians who say that they've got dirt on Hillary Clinton. I mean, who does he think he's meeting with? Who does he think he's sending his son and his son-in-law to meet with?
Clearly the Girl Scouts, Ken.
Yeah. I don't see. You have to really be willing to turn some very blind eyes to some very obvious inferences there. And in the case of the phone calls with Stone, to direct telephone records of when these calls took place to say that it had nothing to do with Trump.
Well, and to go further and to take a look at some of the actual passage from the report itself states that the Russia took immediate steps to influence the 2016 election. And again, I'm gonna pause and editorialize right here. I think that no one has given Romney enough credit. Back when he ran against Obama, he called this out, and the whole world and Obama laughed at him. And I got to be honest, on this one, Romney was dead right. Democrats were dead wrong. You can complain about that editorialization in a minute, Ken. But the takeaway, and you've kind of already summed it. This is the quote from the committee. Quote: The committee found that Manafort's presence on the campaign in proximity to Trump created opportunities for Russian intelligence services to exert influence over and acquire confidential information on the Trump campaign. It goes on to name Russian President Putin by name as being behind the hacks, unquestionably, of the Democratic Party and designed to harm and tarnish, in the words of the report, Hillary Clinton. And not only that, it calls out, as you had mentioned a minute ago, Trump Jr. Attempting to gather Russian information, knowing it was Russian information. Whew.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, what do you add to that? I don't know what you say.
Yeah, I don't know how much more. I do believe we're going to start. I mean, if Biden gets elected, I think we're going to start to see criminal cases. I think this Senate report, along with the Mueller report together, contain enough information that you'll have grand juries reconvened and investigating and issuing indictments against many of these people. And then we'll see if any of them flip on Trump. And I think there will be some opportunities for some of these people to, if they want to tell the truth and cooperate, to save their own skin. And we'll see if the trail leads all the way to Trump.
Yeah, and what's particularly a little bit crazy is that also released this week is that the Republican and Democratic chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee made criminal referrals for Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Steve Bannon, Eric Pence, and more to federal prosecutors in 2019 as they were undertaking this work, passing along their suspicions that all of these guys had misled the committee during their testimony, and that comes out this week from NBC News. And yeah, I don't think this is done. I mean, it's clearly not done.
Right.
But I just have a hard time, and I'm just going to say it. And this is an area where I don't think we're going to have a lot of a disagreement. I just don't understand how fellow Republicans can't just be like, this is absurd. This is just, and absurd is not even the right word. It's too weak of a word.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hate to have to be attempting to defend this, and I'm happy that I don't. I just
and look how many of the people that were surrounding Trump in 2016 have already been indicted and in many cases convicted of different kinds of crimes. I mean, almost everybody that was involved with that campaign, finally finishing with Bannon this week. But
yeah, well, let's talk about that. That's I think that's probably going to end up being one of our last stories because this past Thursday, Steve Bannon was arrested and charged, ironically, by postal workers with fraud in New York. And so what had happened was Bannon, allegedly at least, is defrauded donors out of hundreds of thousands of dollars with a crowdfunding campaign called, quote, Build the Wall, end quote. It brought in a little over $25 million. And all that can mean is I think, Ken, that we are not promoting the way of the politics guys well enough, because if they can get $25 million for the wall, surely we can get like $100,000 for the politics guy. Anyway, that aside,
maybe we should build a wall.
There we go. For every $20 you give to the politics guys, we will take one brick out of the wall. How about it could be a bring the wall down.
Right.
I'm going to get in trouble with my anyway. The indictment charges that Bannon used the nonprofit to take $1 million from the crowdsourcing funds to cover, quote, in the terms of the document, hundreds of thousands of dollars in his personal expenses, end quote. And as you had just mentioned, that Bannon is now joining the list of 6 other Trump associates who have been charged federally, right? You got Roger Stone, you got Michael Flynn, you got Rick Gates, you got Paul Manafort, and you got Michael Cohen. And now we got Bannon. So I guess the question I have for you, since you're the lawyer on this, Ken, is there's been some scuttle that this is going to be particularly bad news, the Bannon news for Trump, because one way that Bannon could attempt to get out of this is to say, hey, I've got information on better things. What do you think of the likelihood of that? Or do you think that's just pure speculation?
That is speculation. I think it would be, I don't think it would be. I don't know that it's that anyone's in a position to even think about that exchange yet, because after all, this is still the Trump administration that's prosecuting Bannon right now. Things could change if it becomes the Biden administration, but I don't think that's something that the prosecutors are. That's not a transaction they're looking to make right now. The Barr Justice Department, and also the thing that Bannon was indicted for is very attenuated from anything having to do with the 2016 campaign. So I'm not sure that's going to happen. I will say I have a little bit of qualms about this indictment and a little bit of sympathy for Bannon here, perhaps surprisingly. And you'll probably be even more surprised to hear that I'm going to say the same about the New York Attorney General's prosecution of the NRA. They're very similar cases. Right, these are cases where both the NRA and Steve Bannon are basically being indicted on the theory that they fleeced their idiot donors. Right, and that's really the theory of both cases. And I think that the reason I have a little heartburn about this is because I don't think any of their donors are upset by it. Right, I mean, if you look at who is it that's delighted to see the NRA indicted and Bannon indicted, it's people that would never have given money to the NRA or to build the wall, and the people that actually gave the money to the NRA and to build the wall,
they knew what they were getting effectively.
I mean, I think a lot of them would say, well, even if Bannon told us that he's going to give every penny of it to build the wall, and in fact he only gave 24 out of every $25 of it to build the wall, and he put the $25 in his pocket. I don't know that a lot of those donors would be that upset by that, really. And so I feel like there is a weirdly, like people are really, a lot of people on my side of the aisle are just so excited to see people like Steve Bannon or the NRA getting indicted that they're not necessarily wanting to think too hard about whether there's some prosecutorial overreach here. But I do feel like these are somewhat victimless kinds of crimes that if I gave money to an organization that I supported and I found out that actually the people asking me for the money were pocketing a whole lot of it, I'd be pretty mad. But I actually don't think that's the case with the people who gave money to build the wall or to the NRA for that matter, because I think they care about the symbolism of those organizations as much as they care about whether the money's going to be used effectively or not. That's my read of them anyhow. I think that's why they're not that upset. So I don't know that I think it's a 100% righteous prosecution, even though I think it's true probably that there's evidence that Bannon pocketed about one out of every 25 of the dollars that came in. But I don't know how much of that was something that his donors really were offended by.
Well, Ken, we're starting to run out of time, so I think what we might need to do is turn to our last item, which is what we've been reading this week. And I'll let you go first if you're interested. What's been your what you reading?
Yeah, so I actually I was rereading a book that I read in college, and it's a book by the late 19th, early 20th century historian of the American historian William Dunning, and the book is called Reconstruction, Political and Economic, 1865 to 1877. Dunning wrote it in 1907, and it's a classic kind of pro-Confederate history of the Reconstruction era, really very critical of Reconstruction. And I wanted to read it again because I just noticed that a lot of the contemporary American historians that I think the most highly of, like Eric Foner, who dedicated a lot of his career to kind of refuting Dunning, he would still say, well, anyone who wants to understand Reconstruction should still start by reading Dunning, and then you can read why he was wrong about everything. And so I just felt like I should go back and reread Dunning and get that sort of older view of Reconstruction as being kind of a corrupt enterprise and a offense against the South. So that's sort of the perspective that Dunning takes. It's the opposite of my perspective, but I wanted to go back and reread that.
Oh, and that's I can't even tell you. I don't think I've ever read that whole book. I think I've only read pieces of it.
Of Reconstruction, Political and Economic by William Dunning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's the first major history of Reconstruction. It's written more than 100 years ago now. But it's worth reading, but it is really unsympathetic to the newly freed African Americans. It's extremely sympathetic to the people that had been running the Confederacy, and it's kind of jarring to read with a modern eye. But I think it is. It's still. He was the first serious historian to write a serious history of Reconstruction.
Well, very cool. Well, the one I went a completely different way. I have been reading. I don't know if you're familiar. You might not be. Richard Foster. Richard Foster is a Quaker theologian, and he has written extensively on the spiritual disciplines. But he has one particularly famous book on prayer. And so this week and last week, I've been working through Richard Foster's book on prayer. And a big part of that was, school's been starting back up. I've had a lot of things going on with me, and in my my own life, I am a unabashed Christian, but I don't think that prayer has always been my strong point when it came to that. And we were coming back, having students come back, and there was a lot of question about how this was going to go down, and so I've been trying to really dedicate this semester to focusing on the spiritual discipline of prayer. And what Richard Foster does is he actually goes through different kinds of prayer. And for me, it's been a wonderful meditative opportunity to kind of revisit a practice that's dear to my own tradition. And I know not everybody who listens to the show obviously shares my faith tradition, and then that's completely fine. But that's just part of what we do when we're talking about what we're reading, is just kind of sharing who we are and what we do, and that's a big part of my life, and a big part of what I attempt to do is to have a large spiritual component to what I do in my life, and it was very helpful for me this week to kind of focus on this, and to be honest, it brought me outside of my comfort zone in a way from his Quaker background, and I've really appreciated his Quaker theological points inside some of the different kinds of points of prayer, and for somebody, it kind of helped me reopen my eyes to some of my own spiritual aspects, and so for those who may share similar faith traditions that include prayer, I've been reading Richard Foster's book on prayer. So, well, Ken, it's always fun doing the show with you, and I hope you enjoyed doing the show with me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Well, good. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to the Politics Guys. I know that all the hosts, myself included, we absolutely love working on the show. And to make it possible, it takes listeners like you. And one of the ways you can make this show possible is by continuing to subscribe to the Politics Guys on the podcast app of your choice. So does sharing episodes. So does sharing this particular episode with your friends, with your family. Annoy them with something that isn't QAnon. But additionally, in addition to that, we also need your support. If Bannon can get 25 million, let's go for a little bit for us. And unlike the wall, which gets you nothing, one of the great things about being a supporter of the Politics Guys is you're going to get access to some really cool content. And one of those is our full-length supporters-only Wednesday show. As a matter of fact, this week, Ken and I are going to be covering a bunch of stories we weren't able to cram into this show. We're going to be talking about USPS. We're going to be talking about some of the Trump legal woes, including his stay on tax returns, and a whole lot more. So if you would like to continue to listen to Ken and myself as we talk about these additional items on Wednesday, our full show, all you have to do is become a supporter of the Politics Guys. To do that, you can check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/politicsguys, or you can go to our website, politicsguys.com/support. So join me and Ken again on Wednesday. Get all of this additional bonus content by heading to patreon.com/politicsguys. If you've got a question, a comment, a correction, or just a random thought you'd like to share, you can reach us at mail@politicsguys.com. We also strive for civil and rational debate on our Reddit at Bipartisan Politics, and we've been having some really phenomenal conversations. Mike and Jay have been kind of getting into it on the question of supporting for Trump and for Republicans, and it'd be wonderful to have you there as well. So again, Join us on our Reddit at Bipartisan Politics. You can also find us on Twitter at Politics Guys. And as a final reminder, don't forget, we'll have new free shows from Mike's new show with 6 Northern Kentucky University students. It's going to be a lot of fun. That one is free for everyone, and that's going to be starting in just a couple of weeks. The executive producers of the Politics Guys are Bruce Johnson, Wilmer Morano, Andra Masker, Nathan Sazowski, Daniel Toe, and Chris Wilkerson. Today's show was produced by myself, Trey Orndorff. We'll be back with a new show, a bonus show, on Wednesday. We hope you'll join us then.